Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem. This is Rabbi Peterson here in El Salvador. Just bringing this special teaching over the Book of Esther, and doing it in English this time. I usually do it in Spanish, but I want to give a special shout out to our congregation, Beth Yeshua HaMashiach in Houston. Thank you guys for having me there for those 3 weeks. It was a blessing to be with you, with everybody. And I want to look, since Purim is almost here. It's next Shabbat and the weekend, the 13th and the 14th of Adar. So I want to record this ahead of time. And for anyone else who's watching, what is the root of what happened in the Book of Esther? We know that there were 4 different characters that played an important part. First of all, there was Mordechai. There was his daughter, his adopted daughter, Esther, or her Hebrew name was Hadassah, with Mirta, and her Babylonian name, Esther, means star. And there was King Ahasuerus, who was King Xerxes, and of course there was Haman. So had 4 characters that made up the story of the Book of Esther. So we have the evil Haman. He wants to destroy the Jewish people off the face of the earth. But where does this actually take place? What is the root of this hatred, of the hatred toward HaYehudim? Well, we got to look back in Genesis 27. We'll look at that. Genesis 27, 15 through 17. Well, let's see. It actually comes in 41. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with his father blessed him. It all starts back in 15, where the blessing goes to Jacob. The best blessing goes to Jacob and not Esau. The part of Esau is that he will live by the sword, and therefore he has this violent nature, and his descendants will live by the sword. And once he got that blessing, he says, Esau hated Yaakov because of the blessing, whereas his father blessed him. Esau said to his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, and then I will slay my brother Jacob. So it all stems from hatred on the part of Esau. One fact is that Esau marries pagan women, and his grandson is Amalek. And we know that he also is kin to Ishmael, who will also live by the sword. So Amalek became enemy number 1 for the Jewish people, for Israel. So we have the spirit, Haruach Amalek, Haruach Amalek, the spirit of Amalek, the spirit of destruction, of hatred. And it goes on more. And then we have the command by Adonai to destroy Amalek in Deuteronomy 25, 17 through 19. So let's look there. Deuteronomy 25. We have 17 through 19. It says, remember what Amalek did unto thee on the way when ye came out forth of Egypt. Remember that they attacked the rear side, the rear lines of Israel, whom you were coming forth out of Egypt, and how he met thee by the way and smote the hindmost part of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not God. And therefore shall be, when the Lord thy God have given thee rest from all thy enemies around the land which the Lord thy Elohim giveth thee for inheritance to possess it, thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Thou shalt not forget it. So God is commanding destruction of Amalek here. You know, in 1 Samuel 15, it also states that King Saul was ordered by Shmuel to wipe out Amalek. Men, women, children, cattle, everyone. However, when he came back from the battle, he had the nerve to say to Shmuel, I have done the Lord's command. Hey, but what is this bleating of the cattle in my ears? And I hear them, the lowing of the calves. And look, you've brought Agag alive. You have not performed the commandment of Adonai. You disobeyed the order, and therefore your kingdom is going to be ripped from you. So he let some of the Amalekites live. Now, Shmuel took a sword and killed Amalek right there. Killed Agag, the Amalekite. But still, some lived. In time, we have the time of Esther, 450 years BC. We see that Haman is a descendant of Amalek. And let's take a look now, and we're going to look at the book of Esther. So we know this history. It starts out with Vashti refusing to come before King Ahasuerus, or King Xerxes, refuses to come. And he fires her, he gets rid of her, and chooses Esther instead. She doesn't reveal herself as a Jew right away. Her Hebrew name, as we says, is Hadassah. But then she says, my name is Esther. There's a lot of symbolism in here. Esther is an orphaness, and her uncle Mordecai adopts her, kind of like Yeshua adopts us. Elohim adopts us as his children when we accept Yeshua as Messiah and Lord. We come into his family. In that same way, Mordechai adopted Esther, or Hadassah. Haman wants attention. He wants to take over. He is an Agagite. He is an Amalekite. And he proposes a plan, as we know. In the Book of Esther, he plans a plan to destroy the Jews from the province, from all the 127 provinces of Persia. Now, this wasn't a local Holocaust. This was just like World War II. So Mordecai was devoted to Adonai. He did not bow down to anyone, not even Haman. And he got mad. And this is his decree. In chapter 3, it says, "And after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him his seat above all the princes that were with him, and all the king's servants. But Mordecai did not bow down, nor did he do reverence to him. And he continues saying, that came to pass when he spoke to him daily, that he hearkened not unto him, that he told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told him that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did he do reverence, then was Haman full of wrath." In verse 6, "And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shown him the people of Mordecai. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai." Now, verse 8, this is where the plan comes. "And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad, and dispersed around the people all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws and diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them, or to let them live. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. I will pay thee 10,000 talents to silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business. Bring it into the king's treasury." And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. So the king unwittingly said, okay, you stand to get some more money. So here's the plan. They cast the lots when this would happen. And it turned out to be the 13th and the 14th day of Purim, of Adar, which is right around the corner. However, Esther found out through Mordecai. He found out through Mordecai that this was planning. This was in the making. Mordecai says, you need to do something. You need to speak to the king. You need to intervene for our people. And we can see this happening in the past. One intervenes for another. Moshe intervened many times for his people before Adonai. And Yeshua intercedes for us in the heavenlies every day. However, protocol deemed that no one can go before the king unless the king would invite them to come in. So Esther was in a predicament. She hadn't been called. And we know what happens. She says, fast for 3 days and pray, all the Jews of our kingdom. And if I perish, I perish. So we know the story. She went in. She was willing to die in order to save her people, the Jewish people, our people. We see some correlation between Yeshua. Yeshua was willing to die for our sins. However, he went before his Father in heaven. And he says, let this cup pass, but if not, not as I will, but as thy will. He died for our sins to save the whole world from the curse of sin and damnation. Esther was willing to die, but she lived. And the result was the Jewish people could defend themselves. And through all the book of Esther, the name of God is never mentioned. However, we see the action of God, of Adonai Elohim, of Yorivavhe, his activity, his involvement in putting everyone in place, a certain time, a certain place. It wasn't by accident that Esther was made queen. So therefore, King Ahasuerus could not undo what he did. He made a decree to wipe out the Jewish people through the deceit of Haman. But then he made another decree. Your people will be able to defend themselves. So we know the plot. Esther goes before the king. He extends the scepter, and she touches it, and he says, what shall be given to thee, Esther? And that seems like Yeshua before his Father, interceding for us as his children. So there's a lot of symbolism. So what happens? The 13th and the 14th day of PURIM, the Jews defend themselves. In the palace himself of Shushan, it says that 500 of the Jews' enemies were killed. The Jewish people defended themselves throughout all the provinces. And it says that they could take those possessions of their enemies' possessions, including the 10 sons of Haman. Now, here's an interesting thing. Chapter 9. I'll read chapter 9, starting with verse 2. Well, I'll start with 1. On the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment on his decree drew near to be put into execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, the Jews had rule over them that hated them. the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for their fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Yehudim, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went throughout all the provinces, for this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those who hated them. And the Shushan, the Jews destroyed 500 men. Now, the list of sons, now, according to custom, we need to read the names of the sons of Haman in one breath. I don't know if we can do it. And some even do it in a song. En Parashadatha, en Dalfan, en Asparatha, en Porata, en Dalia, en Aridata, en Parmashata, en Arisai, en Aridai, en Vasechata. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hamadai, the enemies of the Jews slew. On the spoil they did not lay their hands. On that day the number of those that were slain in Shushan was brought before the king, and the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan in the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman that have done the rest of the king's provinces. Now what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? Or what is thy request, and it shall be done? Now, here's an interesting thing. And said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews that which are in Shushan to do tomorrow. Also according to this day decree, let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan that they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Well, here's something interesting. They were slain with the sword. They were already dead, so why should he hang them? Well, one reason is just to display their bodies as a warning to everyone who would rebel and try to kill the Jews. Now, here is some prophecy. Usually when it says King Ahasuerus or King Xerxes, but here it just says the king. Now, when it just says the king, prophecy dictates they're talking about Melech Adonai. So in a way, prophecy she's saying Melech Adonai. Let it be granted, okay? That on Shushan to do tomorrow, according to this day decree. Tomorrow, right? About 2,450 years later, what happened? Okay. Now, very interesting. One of the interesting things about the Talmud, okay, in Tractate Megillah, it talks about Germania of Edom. Should they go forth, they would destroy the world. This is from the Talmud in Tractate Megillah. 2,000 years before the event happened, where is Germania? Germania is modern-day Germany. Should they go forth, they would destroy the world. And exactly what happened. In 1939, Germany declared war on Europe. But they allied themselves with Italy. What is Italy? Who is Italy? Rome. So Germania and Roma united themselves. Hitler made a treaty alliance with Rome. They went forth throughout all of Europe, massacring 6 million Jews, sending our people to the concentration camps, to the death camps. This happened, and it's in the Talmud. And it talks about the Talmud that Germania of Edom had 300 princes. Now, Hitler hated Purim because it reminded him of the conquest of Amalek. And he had a phobia. He had a philosophy. It was okay to be corrupt and not have a conscience of the soul. So Hitler was, the spirit of Amalek was within Hitler. So remember, a spirit cannot be killed. It just goes forward. Now, very, very interesting. In the Megillah, in verse 9, where it talks about the 10 sons, in the Megillah of the scroll, the only place in the Bible, there's a space between the names of the 10 sons of Haman. Why is that? I'll show you right here. Here it is. And I put the names right here on beside of them. In this part of the Megillah, there's some names here. If you look at this, look, there are 2 names, Parmashata, the Shin and the Tav, and then the Bayazata. There's a small Zion and a large Nun. Okay? That's where we have it. Right there, see? Why do you think that happened? The only place. Why that space between the names? Why that space? Well, if we take and do some math, the Tav, the Shin, and the Zion, when you add up in Gematria, add up to be 707. The large Vav is a multiple of 6. So how many times does it appear in history? We have from day 1, then we have 707, and then 2, 1,707, 3, 2,707, 4, 3,707, 5, 4,707, and 6, 5,707. What year is 5,707? It's the year 1946. What happened in 1946? The Nuremberg trials, where there were 11 Nazi criminals were to be hanged, right? We have the 10 sons of Haman plus Haman. It would equal 11 that were hanged altogether. However, Hermann Göring committed suicide. So ended up with 10 Nazi criminals that were hanged. And we can very, very easily put their names within these walls, within these here. So we look at the names here, and I write them here. We have Hans Frank, Wilhelm Frick, Alfred Jodl, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Wilhelm Keitel, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Alfred Rosenberg, Fritz Saukel, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, and Julius Streicher. Julius Streicher was the one very anti-Semitic, who was the publisher of Der Stürmer. So you see, that's the mystery. That was something very interesting about chapter 9 in the book of Esther. But it's very, very important that we celebrate Purim, because tell us that through Esther, the Jewish people were saved. They were allowed to defend themselves. And it says here in chapter 9, verse 28, these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that these days of Purim should not fail among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. And Esther the queen, daughter of Abigail, and Mordechai the Jew, wrote all the authorities to confirm the second letter of Purim. And he sent letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces to confirm these days of Purim on their times appointed. So, they should celebrate these days. So the 13th and the 14th of Adar to be celebrated are 2 days to be celebrated with feasting, with gaiety, with happiness, to know that once again, Hasatan has been foiled. HaYehudim will continue forever. We have all this symbolism within the Book of Esther. Well, thank you for letting me share this with you. Again, a shout out to Beth Yeshua, to all of you there. It was a really joy to be there for those 3 weeks. And whoever's listening, shalom.